Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
I don't know how to start this.
I'm Andy.
I'm Jordan.
I'm me. Welcome back again for the second time or the third time. I don't know how
Third
many
time.
videos you've watched.
Yeah, third time if you've
Hey, I
been here
can't
before.
predict. Maybe they're only here for Loki. That's, I don't know.
True.
Which is what we're here to talk about. Speak of the devil.
Whoa, Loki
Oh, devil.
just came out. Spoilers,
Uh,
obviously.
yes, certainly. This is spoilers for Loki episode 1. I don't know why you would be here for an episode 1 discussion if you thought there weren't going to be spoilers. That's not how this works. I think let's go through the episode, like loose plot points of the episode, and then we'll do overall thoughts at the end. I think that's the best way to do it.
I mean, take it away.
Okay. Episode opens, exactly how you know it's going to open because they showed it in the trailer, which is 2012 Loki from either Avengers or Endgame, depending on how you frame it, getting away with the Tesseract after the Battle of New York. And then landing in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. And immediately upon landing, he is arrested by the Time Variance Authority, who step out of doorways in thin air and take him and the Tesseract into custody. Then we meet Casey for the first time, who is probably my favorite character in the show.
The most
Absolute
powerful
legend.
man in the world.
All those Infinity Stones.
All those paperweights, it does a lot for someone. What else? He gets arrested. He goes through a whole bunch of shenanigans, getting undressed.
The bureaucratic system, Dylan.
Indeed.
Take a ticket.
But there's only 2 of us in here. That was also a great line. that speaking of that scene, the other guy, the Goldman Sachs trust fund kid, whoever the fuck he was, the other man in there, such a good character. I loved all of that. He gets through the line, gets to the end, asks for his ticket. I tried to get a ticket. I asked him for his ticket. He wouldn't give me a ticket. Then just gets fucking murdered, which was amazing.
They pruned Dylan.
Pruned. True. He was pruned. He was not murdered. I do not sue me, TVA, please.
He was pruned.
The first important discussion point is the Miss Minutes TVA little animated intro scene. I think there was a huge amount of backstory contained within that one little thing. What did you guys think about that little exposition piece?
I mean, so we get introduced to the timekeepers and how the timeline is settled. We know there's multiple timelines. They go to war. Timekeepers converge everything into one sacred timeline. No, I thought it was very nice to have some information that is, if you're a comic book reader, you probably already know about all of this well in advance. But for all of us non-comic book people, it was a good little explanation of the timeline.
So it's interesting because it wasn't really something that was like, oh, comic book readers know this. It's not really a departure from the comics, but it was sort of referencing some comic book stuff and then taking it in a new direction because they mentioned the multiversal war, which is certainly a reference to Secret Wars, which is a huge comic book event. Which features all sorts of universes crashing into each other and then having a big war. And then they say that the 3 timekeepers in that chaos ended the war and cut everything down to one timeline, which is sort of a crazy thing to say because it implies that there is no multiverse anymore. Right? If there's only one sacred timeline and they're constantly pruning, then there are no other timelines. Is sort of what that animation implies.
Yeah.
Well, and I think they said, too, they took, the multiverse and made it into one sacred timeline. I'm pretty sure they said that, it's basically not a multiverse anymore.
Right. They really were saying that they destroyed the multiverse to stop there from being another war. there's obviously the question of do you believe them, because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
could be lying.
Well, then you go into, we know Multiverse of Madness is coming. So does that imply that there's a potential failure with this Loki variant experiment?
Exactly. And even before Multiverse of Madness, we know Spider-Man No Way Home has 3 different Spider-Men from different universes that all look different.
Yeah.
So that brings me to a whole massive line of questioning, which really the kickoff to that line of questioning would be, are universes the same thing as timelines? Could there be multiple universes that each have their own TVA, and the TVA in each individual universe is trying to cut that universe down to one timeline? Or are timeline and universe interchangeable words? Is the TVA just straight up lying and they are maintaining one timeline, but there are a ton of others out there? Like, we have no idea. Or is the TVA telling the truth, and that means that by the end of Loki, heading into What If, which is based around alternate timeline stories, and heading into No Way Home and Multiverse of Madness, that the TVA is going to get destroyed or interrupted in some way that prevents them from pruning timelines down to just one.
All because of Loki.
But which Loki?
Yeah. Which of the millions of? I mean, I'm guessing that deviant Loki, the evil problem creating Loki, is probably going to be the perpetrator here. My question is, does our new variant Loki team up with evil deviant Loki?
I think that's a very good question, but we might be getting slightly ahead of ourselves.
True.
So
true.
we'll put a pin in that for a minute, and we'll keep going from where we left out. Oh, one more thing about that animation. I've had a theory. I didn't mention it in the preview video because I wasn't sure how plausible it was, but I think it is now. The timekeepers are people who existed during the first multiversal war, is at least what they say in that animation.
Yep.
I think that all 3 timekeepers, particularly in that animation, they show the 3 of them, particularly because of how the middle one looks. I think that all 3 timekeepers are Kang variants from old timelines from the first multiversal war. Like, either neutral or just not evil versions of Kang from other timelines that came together and used their time travel powers to create the TVA. Because the other thing is, when you think about it, I don't know if the TVA are good guys. What they're doing.
I feel like they're very Wizard of Oz-esque of us. Like, it's a big smoke show and like they're acting like good people, but like, are they really good people?
And are they even real? I would go as far as to say with that
Exactly.
Wizard of Oz comparison, because we haven't seen them yet.
Exactly.
But yeah, I wonder that what the TVA is doing feels a little bit morally suspect to me. Like, are they not really removing free will from the universe? Because while you do have, everyone has the freedom to make whatever choice they want, as soon as someone makes a choice that the timekeepers don't approve of, they prune the timeline. And so everything can only happen at the timekeeper's behest. It feels a little bit questionable to me. I don't know about you guys.
No,
Agreed.
really. I think it's sketch.
Very.
So,
And,
yeah.
I think gotta find out more about, which I'm sure they're gonna go deeper into, because Loki's not just gonna take this at face value.
Right.
That's not his character type of trust and belief in a message without, empirical reasoning behind it.
Well, he says in the episode, trust is for children and dogs. So
Yep.
obviously he's not going to trust them at all, and I don't expect they'll trust him.
Well, they don't like him.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Okay, so where we were, the animation. So going on from there, yeah, he goes on trial in front of Ravana Renslayer, who I thought was fucking awesome. By the way, she was great in the episode.
Yes.
He's sentenced to be reset. Has a little bit of a freak out about what that means, and then Mobius comes in to save his day.
Wow.
Still waiting for the wow.
Oh, it's coming. I have no doubts that it's coming. And so Mobius whisks him away to a room to have a conversation with him and try to pick his brain because Mobius knows at this point that the killer he's hunting in the timeline that's jumping around time, killing people and baiting the TVA squads into traps to kill TVA agents. He seems to know that that's a Loki variant of some kind, and so he now wants to pick this Loki variant's brain to try to get ideas on how to stop the killer Loki, which is a good idea. But will it work? I don't know. And so he takes Loki into that room, and they have some really great interactions, and then Mobius plays him sort of the tape of how his life is supposed to go, which we talked about in the predictions that we hoped would happen. And
Yeah,
it
about
leads to
that.
some really cool moments.
A lot of, he realizes, oh shit, like, yeah, I have been fucking life up for a lot of people lately. And you see, what does he go back to when he, eventually he runs away, gets away, goes back to the room. What's the first thing that he looks at is the mom shot.
Well, yeah, he goes back to it multiple times, like rewinds and like looks at her. And he's just
So,
focused on his mom.
yeah, so we know there has to be some kind of belief in what he's seeing and some guilt for something that he hasn't even done yet.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, and also something that was maybe one of my very few problems with the episode is that this is Loki who is, that episode takes place for him essentially, minutes, hours after he attempted to take over the Earth in Avengers. Like, this is pure villain Loki. And pretty quickly in this episode, and I understand why they had to do it, but they flip him to be like sympathetic, not just a straight up villain Loki because they need the audience to root for him in the show. I get it, but it felt like a very quick turnaround for me when you really put in perspective of like, this guy was just fucking cutting people's eyeballs out, which they literally show to him, and murdering people hours ago and invading New York and just slaughtering people.
Yeah, I think once he realized the Infinity Stones in the drawer, the power the TVA actually wields, I think that was a mind-blowing shock to him. And he kind of came to some senses very quickly. Now, yeah, like you said, it was a pretty quick character switch. How believable or how much that's actually going to stick to this next episode, I'm curious to see. But yeah, clearly sympathetic, clearly regretful of something that he is going, or whatever him in the timeline is going to do.
But I feel like it's also trying to show you like this type of a characteristic in Loki has always been there. He's just always covered it up by trying to take over the earth and pull people's eyeballs out or whatever. But he's always had that characteristic that we grew to know in all of the other movies, that it was always there. And that's why they're able to kind of show that so quickly.
Well, I mean, Odin in Ragnarok even mentioned that Loki was always kind of a gentle child.
Correct.
Though mischievous,
A
as his
mischievous
title.
little scamp.
Yeah, but he's always been that soft-hearted boy. So
Who loves his mom?
Who loves his mom. He's just a real mama's boy at heart.
He is.
Okay?
That's true. And you know, circling back slightly, I agree that seeing that drawer full of Infinity Stones definitely was a humbling moment for him, and it is like for the audience too. Like you're watching the show and you're like, oh, everything I have watched up to this point almost feels like it is nothing compared to what I'm looking at now. Like it's almost meaningless. The scale of it, you know, even Endgame, the scale of Endgame's almost nothing when you're staring at this drawer full of Infinity Stones that are completely powerless.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it-
we know that regular people can't even hold an Infinity Stone, and they're using them as paperweights.
Yeah. Yeah, the paperweight line is so great. I wish they'd shown some people using them as paperweights. It was
In
was
the
a little bit
future.
interesting to me that tesseract seemed to be the only tesseract in that drawer, and also there was no. I'm gonna get it wrong. Either mind or there were no. There was no soul stones, is what it was. I think there was one big mind stone and no soul stones in the drawer.
I
And I
think
was
it's create a deviant timeline off of the Soul Stone because that's pretty, pretty permanent of a decision.
right, but it's just I just thought it was interesting. I don't know if it means anything, but it was something that I saw and I was like, I wonder if this is going to come back around in any way. If there's a reason, you know, the Soul Stone I can kind of see because, like you said, it's hard to obtain. You know, it seems to probably sit on Vormir dormant and hidden away for millions of years at a time, maybe. But the Tesseract, like, has been everywhere. I mean, it was sitting on Earth
Yeah.
with Shield for decades. No one at Shield ever tried to do anything with it and fucked up. That seems insane to me.
I mean, it was buried in a synagogue.
Yeah. So it was interesting. I don't know. It might not. It might not mean anything. But then, you know, he's looking at that drawer of paperweights, and he's in awe at all the power. And then he goes up to the monitor at the front of the room, which seems to be their sort of graphic for the sacred timeline. And it looks like there's a red line above and below the sacred timeline, and they sort of reference that on a couple of the TVA's little missions in the middle that branches are about to redline or whatever. So, and we saw in the trailer that graphic with tons of branches coming off of it. So I'm curious to see what those red lines mean, if that contradicts what the animation tells us, and other parallel timelines exist outside the red lines, and the TVA is just protecting this one sacred one. That could be another way that maybe the animation wasn't telling the whole truth. I don't know.
I also think the red lines could be too, like, if a branch gets off and goes past that red line, that's when it really starts to become its own thing, and it's really not so much a branch of the sacred timeline. It's now its own thing totally once it gets so far away.
Yeah, that's possible. It's interesting because they mention, I remember particularly in the church scene in France when we first meet Mobius, you know, they're in there for seemingly only a couple minutes. And before they leave, the one TVA agent tells Mobius, like, oh, it's about to redline. And I'm like, okay, so seems like a pretty quick amount of time for a timeline to diverge so drastically that they're afraid. But I don't know what happens once it redlines. Like, they seem to be afraid of that, but what does that mean? Does that mean they give up on that timeline? They can't reset it anymore? They can't prune it anymore? I don't know. And I assume they'll get into that mechanic at some point, but we don't know that yet.
But with the quickness, think about how many once a wrong decision gets made and a different choice gets made, how many billions of different choices will then get made
Yeah,
off of
exponentially increasing.
Yeah, so it's something that's going to happen extremely quick.
For sure.
Or these red lines are just a scare tactic made by these, three people that created the TVA, and
Yep.
Who knows what they're up to.
Also definitely possible. Okay, so from there, yeah, Loki goes back to the room with Mobius. He has a little fight with the one TVA agent who seems to be in charge. I don't know if we ever got any sort of name for her character. But but she was pretty great throughout the episode. He has a fight with her. He puts the collar on her neck and sends her away, and then he sits down and he plays out the rest of his the rest of what his life is supposed to be after his mother dies, and he watches, quickly watches the events of Ragnarok. He sees Odin call him his son even after all he'd done, and then Odin dies. He sees, all his nice little brotherly moments with Thor near the end of Ragnarok and them fighting side by side. And then he watches his own neck get snapped, and it's a really brutal and awesome scene, which is exactly what I was hoping for when I was predicting that they might show that happen.
Very emotional.
Surprisingly emotional. As someone who doesn't really care about Loki, watching him sit there and cry over his mother, and then, it seems like maybe he's crying over his own death at the end there, but it also feels like he's crying over, the fact that his father still, the fact that his father still loved him, the fact that Thor still clearly loved him at the end, and all of that was a complete shock to him because of how he sees himself in this moment post Avengers.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely sees himself as a villain, as a bad guy, and when he gets that opportunity to see the people around him who grew up with him and know him still love him after everything, I mean, that's like a real shock to his system.
It's a validation to him too, just to validate, like, okay, these people really did care about me. They really are my family, and
and also better choices. Yeah, and also the fact that he's lost them now, because even though they're not dead for him, he also says, "Oh, I can't go back to my timeline. My timeline is gone." And he's realizing that, like, oh, even though that stuff hasn't happened to me yet, I still don't get to go back and live a normal life now, because where am I going to go? My timeline has been erased.
Yeah, his choices are to die or work with them.
I think he has a lot of overwhelming emotions kind of overtaking him at once.
And also, I just want to mention, the fucking score in this episode was amazing. The score in that scene where he's watching his life play out was really beautiful. And also, when we skipped it, but the moment where he's walking with Mobius and he looks out at Chronopolis, which is the name of the city around the TVA, the score there was really cool too, where I was like, I don't know anything about this place, and just staring at this big CGI sci-fi mess with this score, I still feel like, holy fuck, this is amazing. I want to go walk around this place.
Yeah. No, again, great job. But we expect that from Marvel at this point, right?
The scores are always solid, but I don't know. Me personally, I was really blown away by the score in this episode. I don't actually know who's doing the score for this show off the top of my head, but they did a great job so far.
Can we quickly talk about why all the technology at the TVA is a combination of future sci-fi and 1950s gadget?
Umbrella Academy.
It was a little Umbrella Academy. Yeah, I think it's just an aesthetic thing. I don't think there's any like in-universe reason. I just think it's always funny to juxtapose, future sci-fi tech with like 1950s American office life type
like
stuff.
Typewriter and fat computer monitor.
Yeah.
Into digital holographic model of TV.
And the control collar for the neck restraint thing looked like a little pager. Like, yeah, it was definitely inspired by 1950s, or maybe not 50s, but earlier tech based on the modern day, despite the fact that, like you said, they had crazy hologram displays that built themselves out of pixels midair and could shatter if you threw a chair through them.
Yeah.
Okay, where were we? So he watches himself die, and Mobius comes back in, and he has his little heart-to-heart to Mobius where he realizes he can't go back to his timeline. He realizes that, well, not realizes, but he, explains how he sees himself, as a weak man who pretends to be powerful by trying to scare people. And he calls himself a villain. And at that point, Mobius says, well, I don't see it that way, and we get the reveal that he wants this Loki variant's help hunting down his timeline murderer, and Loki says, why do you want the god of mischief's help? He's not exactly a detective. And Mobius says, well, the killer we're hunting is you. The implication obviously being that the killer is another Loki variant. How Mobius knows that at this point, I don't know. But the director, or no, the writer, Michael Waldron, who's the showrunner on the show and the writer of this first episode, said that the devil nod in that church in France where the little kid points up at the window and says the devil did this is a reference to it being a Loki because of the horned crown and the horns on the devil. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because everyone immediately went to Mephisto. Everyone was like, oh, Mephisto's in the show. And he immediately came out and was like, no, don't say anything about Mephisto. Not again. He's not in the show. I'm sorry we put it in there. I didn't know it was going to happen this way.
Everyone wants Mephisto.
Hell yeah, man. I want Mephisto too, but he said he's not in the show, and I believe him.
Yeah.
Well, the revelation was pretty freaking mind-blowing, if you ask me.
Yes, it was a good reveal, and I'm surprised they revealed that this early. I mean, I get why they did it, because it's a great hook to make you want to come back for future episodes, and it also is a good explanation for why he cares about this variant being a Loki specifically in the first place.
We don't even know that it is actually Loki.
I suppose we don't technically know, but it is a Loki.
That you think.
It is.
Oh, stop being so skeptical.
They didn't show his face. They had an opportunity to show his face. They explicitly did not show his face.
So weird that you think it's his face.
I guess he could look like anything.
Loki's a shapeshifter.
Exactly.
Might not even be a him.
Could be a her.
Could be a her. That would be crazy if, say, Lady Loki was running around killing people.
Could be a lizard.
It could be a space lizard.
Could be a space shark.
I don't know if it could be a space shark. I don't know if that's true. I feel like a shark would not rock a mysterious hood and cloak that good, but I could be wrong. So, one last question before we get into overall thoughts. It sort of is an overall thought in of itself anyway, but what do we think this murderer's motive is? Because based on what Mobius tells us and what we see at the end, this killer is jumping around the timeline, causing a disruption, waiting for a TVA squad to show up, and then jumping them and killing the TVA squad and taking the reset charge so that the timeline doesn't reset. So I don't know if that means they're trying to intentionally create like red line branch timelines and what that entails, because we still don't know exactly what the consequences of that are, or if they're just trying to murder as many TVA agents as possible. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on what their motive might be?
So I'm going to guess that this Loki knows probably the true nature behind the TVA and the true nature behind these timelines, and is trying to just topple the organization.
Yeah, I feel like the motivation is totally to, quit with this one sacred timeline, supposedly, and have the, multiverse of multiple timelines and multiple things and to come back. I think that's what their overall goal is to get rid of having this one sacred timeline that, these people say is how it has to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think the motive is to take down the TVA to stop this regime of the sacred timeline and this, potential removal of free will from everyone in the universe.
Bring back free will.
Yeah, and I think if I had to make an early prediction, I think that we might see our Loki variant team up, or maybe not team up, but
work with.
agree in some part with this murderous Loki variant in ending up by the end of the show seeing the TVA as corrupt and something that shouldn't be going on anymore, and we could see the destruction of the TVA or at least changing their mode of operations to bring the multiverse back, like you guys said.
Season 2.
So that's the interesting thing is we know there's a season 2, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the TVA is still around. It's a Loki show. So season 2, the end of this season could absolutely destroy the entire TVA and just take him on a totally different adventure. We don't know. Or it could just see like maybe they overthrow the timekeepers and rather than keep one sacred timeline, they just try to, I don't know, keep the branches from getting too crazy, stop timelines where like horrendous things are going to happen, stop future Thanoses, stuff like that. It could just be a change where the TVA changes how they operate and ditches the timekeepers.
Yeah, stop aggressive timelines from progressing.
Right. Or even just keep the peace between timelines. Like they don't do anything other than try to stop another multiversal war from occurring, but they allow, all the branch timelines to go on as they want, which would make sense.
Thoughts?
Yeah. So overall thoughts, I thought it was really great. I saw a lot of people say that there was a big, the whole episode was sort of a big exposition dump where they're just dumping rules and rules and rules on you. But I like that sort of shit because I'm just a massive fucking nerd who loves thinking about dumb time travel theory. So I thought it was awesome. And I thought they did a good job of mixing some good character beats for Loki in there. Him watching his life play out was, a really nice moment, even for someone who doesn't really give a shit about the character. I could recognize that, like, oh, this is really nice. I actually kind of feel a connection to this guy in this moment, even though he's an asshole. And I'm really excited about where they're going to go. I think Owen Wilson is doing a really great job. I think Casey's fucking awesome. He better be back in future episodes. I think Gugu and Batha Raw is great. All the cast was great, and I love the setup, and I can't wait to see where they go with it.
So I'll say my predictions so far still kind of sound. As a first episode, I thought it was very good. I still think my shot at Owen Wilson leading the charge of this cast is correct. I think so far his character has been a highlight of the entire show. Did not anticipate the amazingness of Casey, but I will say a lot of the Marvel shows thus far and a lot of their movies as well have kind of displayed this comical side character that doesn't have really any power, is kind of just like a punching bag. They've kind of had that kind of character.
Yeah, he's sort of the Darcy of this show.
Yeah.
Jimmy Woo.
or the Jimmy Woo, yeah, for sure.
Jimmy Woo. So yeah, I think that's awesome. He's hilarious. I really would like to see more of him just as a comical relief. I need a wow from Owen. That would be nice.
We're definitely getting a wow. I feel sure of it.
I need one. But yeah, so I will say Tom Hiddleston, great job showing emotion as Loki. Owen Wilson was the man of the episode.
Well, I think it was a great show. I think it was very well done, especially for a first episode. And to really not have like all of that crazy action that you expect in, Marvel, like how we had a lot of it in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but to still get you so hooked on to the episode to then want to come back for more and having the emotion, but then having, the comical areas in there as well. And I definitely feel like there could definitely be a wow in the future from this character of Mobius.
Yes, almost certainly. All right. I think is that good? Does anyone have any more thoughts?
I'm tapped out.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right, that was good.
All right, cue the outro.